Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek: The Next Generation. The Genesis Wave, Book 3, by John Vornholt. Read by Tim Russ.
A red fog drifted across the two slivered moons of Torna 4 as she ran into the dingy alley. The disruptor beam streaked past her crouching body, charring the corrugated tin wall and burning a hole in the vacant building. She was the only one left of her species, and now they were trying to kill her. They wanted the bulky chrome box that she carried. She assumed them to be Romulans. It was so strange being known, being exposed, when she had operated for years undercover. She and the other seedlings had infiltrated every nook of the Federation to find out how the meat creatures could help them escape their dying world. With the Genesis technology, they had discovered a way to prepare new homes and propagate their species at the same time. All of that had ended 3 days ago when their world was invaded and their base destroyed. If the Romulans had tracked her down, it meant that they had ransacked the home base, deciphering the records. There was no other way for them to know that she had been entrusted with a portable Genesis device for a new experiment. She either had to destroy it or give it to someone who would do no harm. Genesis could no longer benefit her species, but perhaps it could benefit someone. At that moment, the seedling salvation arrived in the form of a rowdy crew of Bajoran miners and their consorts. The seedling screamed out in her most helpless voice, "Help! Please help me!" The unruly party halted on the sidewalk and peered into the dark alley. The Bajorans came stumbling down the alley and saw the pleasing Bajoran shape she had become, at least to those within range of her spores. She absorbed their thoughts and knew she reminded one brawny miner of an instructor he had had in an orphanage. He took her arm and gingerly helped her sit up.
"What's wrong with you?"
They tried to rob me." The miner instantly ran down the thoroughfare, stomping and making his presence known.
"I don't see them. Let us get you some Brestanti ale. That will fix you up."
She touched the shiny metal box. "Thank you. Don't forget my luggage." The miner dutifully picked it up. As they strode from the alley, the seedling glanced over her shoulder at the dark passage between the corrugated buildings. She hadn't bought herself more than a few minutes of respite, and her pursuers were probably already planning their next move. When they reached the tavern, most of the miners and their consorts went inside, but not the seedling and the miner carrying the box. She told him, "What I want is someplace spiritual, like a temple or a chapel."
"You don't want to go there. They've been slammed with refugees from the Genesis wave. We've got to celebrate surviving the wave."
An odd reaction, thought the seedling, considering that billions of his fellow meat creatures had perished in the last few days, and billions more were homeless. But Torna 4 had been spared, and the sleepy backwater had turned into a bustling city hosting an impromptu festival. The seedling thought she saw someone in a black hood and suit moving among the convivial crowd. She tugged on the miner's shoulder. "Let's go now." Krylar Yorka recoiled from the noise and the stench. His elegant, richly appointed Bajoran temple had been turned into a warehouse for humanoid suffering. Yorka stroked the wispy gray hair atop his head. This was what he was trained to do: step in where needed and help the poor and afflicted. He pulled his maroon robes around his stout figure and tried to look officious. He was nothing more than a Krylar, a monk, but this sect respected him as a former Vedic in the assembly. Yorka was their leader in all but name and rank. And Yorka knew he had to lead his acolytes and volunteers through this tragedy. Suddenly, Yorka was besieged by Ferengi, and he gritted his teeth. No one was more difficult to mollify than an impoverished Ferengi. A middle-aged businessman with 3 wives shook his fist with such anger that his earlobes wiggled.
You've got to get us back to Ferenginar. I've got to file reports, insurance forms. I have no transportation to furnish, and you're free to leave or to stay in our house of worship. May I suggest that you pray to the prophets? We're having services in a half an hour.
The Ferengi was incensed.
It's not fair. I lost everything.
Yorka raised an eyebrow.
You still have your life, and your wives. I recall 2 rules of acquisition, which I believe a Ferengi in your situation ought to consider deeply.
The distraught merchant blinked at him with surprise, and even his wives drew closer to hear the words of the Bajoran religious figure.
Rule number 236. You can't buy fate. And rule number 22. A wise man can hear profit in the wind. The first one is self-explanatory, and the second one shows you to be rather pitiable for a Ferengi. Look out into the streets, and you will see merchants profiting from this disaster, while you sit here and whine.
The Ferengi's droopy face brightened into a smile.
These are times of confusion. A good time to make money. Well, they told me you are a wise man, and they're right. My name is Chelak, and if you ever need anything, you just let me know. Whatever it is, you'll get it wholesale.
Yorka pulled away from the beaming Ferengi as other refugees bombarded him with questions. As the front door opened, a shrouded figure staggered into the temple, carrying a shiny box that seemed half her size. The visitor lurched toward him and called his name.
Yorka! Privacy!
He pointed up the stairs.
The vestibule.
The visitor nodded in exhaustion.
Take my luggage. And hurry! I'm dying.
He took her box as commanded and escorted her up the metal stairs. Her arm felt brittle and bony, but there was something familiar and comforting about her presence. Passing through brocaded curtains, they reached the richly appointed vestibule. She turned around and dropped the hood, and Yorka gasped. It was Kai Opaka, alive and smiling beatifically at him. She clutched a scorch mark on her side, which was seeping dark fluid.
Let me fetch a doctor. No, Yorka. My time is short.
When she said her time was short, Yorka suddenly remembered that Kai Opaka was dead. Had been for over 10 years. Yet here she stood before him, ebbing in and out of his consciousness. Yorka looked up as he heard the commotion at the front door of the temple.
What is that?
The Kai affixed him with baleful dark eyes.
My pursuers. Listen to me, Vedic Yorka, for I bring your salvation. It's inside this box which you carried, but you must guard it from the Romulans. They cannot be trusted with such power. I am entrusting you with the greatest force in the universe. May the prophets guide you in its use.
With eagerness and fear in equal measure, the monk touched the gleaming box. Before he could even find the latch, he heard the voice of one of his young acolytes.
Trilar Yorka, strangers are looting the temple.
Yorka looked from behind the curtain and gazed grimly at the bedlam. 2 figures in black environmental suits were overturning beds and pews as they ransacked the place. Yorka pulled the youth into the vestibule and motioned toward his special guest. But the Kai was gone. Instead, there was nothing but a pile of moss and dead leaves littering the floor. With determination, Yorka got a grip on his fear and turned to look at the metal box. Although he couldn't explain what he had seen, the mysterious box was real. He looked at the youth. I want you to make a mad dash out the front door and distract them. Don't worry. Before you even get halfway there, I'm going to shut off all the lights in the building. Then I'll go out the back door. Yorka grabbed a red velvet curtain from the wall and wrapped it around the chrome box. For a decoy, he grabbed a brazier from the altar and wrapped it in an identical curtain. You take that and act as if it's priceless. Run now, out the front door,
Go!
Inspired by the former Vedic, the acolyte rushed from the vestibule and pounded down the stairs. Yorka grabbed the unknown object and ran to the circuit box on the wall and pressed where it read, "All circuits off." Every cubic centimeter of the building was plunged into darkness. Yorka moved swiftly down the stairs and muscled his way through the mob at the back door. He spilled into the street along with several others and staggered to his feet, still gripping his prize. Outside, pulling a hood over his head, the Bajoran monk slipped into the wall of onlookers and made his escape as he prayed to the prophets.
Thank you for remembering me. I won't disappoint you.
On the bridge of the Enterprise E, Data turned from the ops console to Beverly Crusher, who sat in the command chair.
Captain, we are approaching the Steamrunner-class starship Barcelona. It is 1.5 light years off course.
Data activated the large view screen at the front of the bridge. In a desolate sector of space floated a sleek, slate-gray starship about half as large as the Enterprise. Beverly Crusher glanced at the android.
Any life signs?
Data shook his head.
Sensor readings are inconclusive because of the radiation. Keep our shields at maximum, Data, and keep trying to hail them.
The red-haired doctor rose to her feet.
Khan, get as close as we need to verify the life sign readings. Then pull back to maximum tractor beam range.
After 3 earlier salvage operations, the crew was getting used to this routine, grim as it was. They had many good reasons not to haphazardly enter one of these abandoned ships, and the best was the possibility of infestation by the moss creatures. Despite their precautions, all they had found so far were crew remains. No moss creatures, alive or dead. Starfleet still didn't know why some crews near the path of the Genesis wave had died, while most lived. Maybe these new anomalies weren't related to the Genesis wave, which made them an even greater mystery. But maybe they weren't too late to help the Barcelona's crew. Data looked up from his console.
Captain, I'm reading 3 distinct life signs aboard the Barcelona. They are not together. Can we use transporters? Inadvisable, Captain, with these levels of radiation. It would also be inadvisable to lower our shields.
The acting captain nodded decisively.
Khan, take us back to a safe distance, say 1,000,000 kilometers. We could take a shuttlecraft over there, or maybe we could tow it out of the radiation field. Either way, we'll need a medical team. Data, alert sickbay.
Crusher then called Captain Picard and Commander Riker to the bridge. Just when she was beginning to think no one would ever arrive to relieve her, the turbolift door slid open. Captain Picard, followed by Riker, entered. Picard nodded curtly to her.
Doctor, please report.
In businesslike fashion, she informed him about the discovery of 3 life signs and her wish to take a shuttlecraft over to the stricken vessel. The captain frowned sharply.
We're under orders, Doctor, not to crack open these ships unless we have to.
Crusher nodded.
But I have a backup plan. We lock on with the tractor beam and, if we can, tow the ship out of the radiation field.
Picard then made his decision.
Data, you lead the away team. Take 3 security and 3 medics. Dr. Crusher and...
The captain looked at her and she continued.
Nurse Ogawa and the duty officer, Dr. Pelagov. We all need radiation suits, even Data.
Riker spoke up.
We still have some of Dr. Brahms's phase-shifting radiation suits. They'll withstand anything, including the Genesis wave.
Picard smiled at Beverly Crusher as she moved to allow him to sit in the command chair.
Well done, Doctor.
She felt she hadn't accomplished much, but words of praise from Jean-Luc were always welcome. Commander Riker leaned over the console and surveyed Crusher, Data, Ogawa, and the other members of the away team, who were ready to go in their environmental suits.
We'll need signal amplifiers to beam you and the survivors out of the Barcelona.
I know it's going to be hard to carry anything else, but you're going to have to take the amplifiers. Beverly nodded, which wasn't easy in the bulky environmental suit. Riker then studied the readouts for a moment. The radiation is down to 60% since we moved to Barcelona, but that's as good as it's going to get. Prepare for boarding. Crusher and the other 6 members of her party stepped upon the transporter platform. Data was in charge, since he was unaffected by the moss creatures. The medical team would follow, each one of them guarded by a security officer. On this mission, she wouldn't mind having a bodyguard, thought Beverly, because she remembered all too well when she had beamed over to inspect the Neptune. She had been deluded by the moss creatures into thinking Wesley had returned, but it wasn't really her son. Aboard the bridge of the disabled starship Barcelona, they found the red-hued emergency lights shining eerily. Data stepped to the ops console and reported. Since the Genesis wave struck 7.8 days ago, the Barcelona shields were destroyed immediately. All systems seem to have failed except for emergency life support. Dr. Pelagoff snorted urgently. Doctor, I've got a life form reading on a level just below us. It's very weak. I suggest we hurry. The team descended one after another into a Jeffries tube and emerged through a bulkhead hatch into the corridor a deck below. Data pointed out a row of phaser scorches on the bulkhead. The android stepped out into an intersecting corridor. Only Data's extraordinary reflexes allowed him to duck away from the blast, which struck his upper arm. He looked at Crusher. I think it's a phaser rifle mounted on a tripod, probably on motion sensor. He looked at 2 of his security team. Set up the signal amplifiers and be ready for emergency beam-out. Data opened a pouch on his belt and removed an electroplasm dispersal grenade. He dashed into the intersection and threw the grenade. As the android dove to the other side of the intersection, the grenade's explosion bathed the corridor with a shimmering, pulsating glow, disabling the phaser rifle. They found a survivor at the end of the corridor in a weapons storeroom, surrounded by spent phasers and power packs. The survivor was wearing a radiation suit identical to theirs, and a comrade behind him also wore the same suit. But that crew member had been dead for days. After Data removed the phaser rifle from its tripod, Ogawa slipped past him to reach the dying man. There was no doubt that the man was suffering from acute radiation poisoning and had only a short time to live. Dr. Crusher glanced at her medical team. Dr. Pelagoff, will you go back with him to sickbay? The Tellarite nodded with relief at the idea of leaving the derelict ship. After they transported, Riker urgently broke in. Data, we've got movement on that second life sign. It's gone from midship level 6 to level 2. In fact, it's moving rapidly toward your position. Data motioned to 2 security officers to flank the medical team, then responded to Riker. We are on alert. Data out. Without warning, a monstrous, churning whirlwind came whipping down the corridor. It caught the 2 security officers off guard and yanked them off their feet. Beverly hit the deck, but soon she felt herself skidding across the deck toward the whirlwind. A strong hand gripped her ankle and she jerked to a stop. She saw flailing arms and looked over to see Ogawa, also in Data's grasp. The android's feet were locked around a conduit. Like a screaming child smashing his dolls, the Dust Devil hurled the 2 security officers against the bulkheads. Tired of them or satisfied, it flew down the corridor leading to the bridge. In her helmet, the doctor thought she heard Riker say something about the 3rd life sign. Beverly crawled to the side of the Bolian security officer named Waypot. She appeared to be dead. Suddenly, Beverly could feel the deck vibrating. The doctor's stomach twisted with fear as she looked up to see a misshapen beast with matted black fur, numerous circular mouths ringed with teeth, and short, writhing appendages. Coldly it studied her, while exuding a fear which overwhelmed her mind. Besieged by waves of dread and nausea, she scrambled to escape. As the beast reared up, she realized she had left Ensign Waypot at the monster's feet. As Data fired his phaser, the beam drilled into the misshapen beast, setting a chunk of its fur on fire. Writhing in agony, the thing stomped on Ensign Waypot's body. Just then, a maw of dancing prism lights appeared from nowhere, engulfing both the beast and the fallen officer. The rippling rainbow passed right through the bulkheads, seemingly coming from all directions to converge on their position. The kaleidoscopic maw began to turn black as it consumed both the beast and Ensign Waypot. In a short time, the swirling cataclysm of colors had turned into a jagged black rift, which split the corridor in two. Beverly's retinas felt burned, as if she had gazed at the sun. She heard Data's voice.
I believe, Doctor, that we have encountered all 3 life forms, plus one which did not register on our initial scans. Would you like to leave the Barcelona now?
Please, Data. Back in sickbay, Beverly found that her vision had cleared a little. She managed to make out Nurse Ogawa, who was bent over an injured security guard, preparing to give her a hypospray. But Waypot, the Bolian guard, was not returning with them. Beverly hadn't thought she would see anything worse than a moss creature on this derelict ship. But she had seen something far worse. Staring in the mirror in her Starfleet hospital room on Earth, Admiral Alina Nechayev was rather proud of her visage. One half of her face was weathered by decades of command and strife, and the other half was as smooth and pristine as a teenager's. One half was spotted with age, and the other half was freckled with youth.
Yes, I am a survivor of the Genesis wave. Other people got t-shirts, but all I got was this lousy face.
70 years of worry, experience, laughter, and tears. All traces were gone from the left side of her face. That's why she had elected to have the youthful half of her face aged, rather than have the older part sculpted to look young. The Admiral knew she was a walking billboard for what was wrong with the Genesis technology. Admiral Nechayev glanced at the clock in her hospital room and saw that she only had 5 minutes left to change her mind. She crossed to her desk, both sides of her face looking determined.
Computer, relay this message to Admiral Rendeles, Chief of Starfleet Command. I am resigning from the Admiralty and Starfleet Command. You have been very considerate not to bust me down to an ensign over my slow reaction to the Genesis threat. Therefore, I am requesting to be demoted to captain and assigned to a ship in the fleet. Sincerely, Alina Nechayev.
A young female orderly was smiling as she entered the hospital room.
Admiral, they've asked me to tell you that there's going to be a half-hour delay. We've been swamped with victims of radiation poisoning.
Nechayev sat up with interest.
Radiation poisoning? From where?
I don't know. A few minutes later, Nechayev was sitting in the corridor outside triage. She learned a great deal. 5 Deltans were the recently admitted cases of radiation poisoning. Their conditions were very serious because the radiation couldn't be identified and conventional treatments didn't work. They didn't conduct her into surgery until almost an hour later, and she could tell from the glum faces that something had gone wrong. Nechayev looked at her head surgeon.
What is it? The 5 Deltans?
You're well informed as usual, Admiral. One is already dead. Maybe some unconventional treatment will work on the others. He motioned to the operating table. Your turn, Admiral. Nurse, prepare the anesthesia. Nechayev held up her hand.
Wait. What are you doing for the Deltans?
We can't do much for them. They're all comatose. We brought in a Vulcan mind meld specialist to see if she can determine what they were doing when they were stricken. Nechayev rose from the table.
I'd like to see that mind meld.
So you will, Admiral, after your own procedure. Nurse, anesthesia.
Oops.
Touring sickbay, Captain Picard still wasn't sure what had happened on the Barcelona, except that one member of the boarding party was lost and the others were in sickbay with injuries. On top of that, it was rather daunting that the ship's medical officer occupied one of the beds, with Nurse Ogawa hovering over her. He gave her a worried smile.
Hello, Beverly. How do you feel?
I'll be up in a minute, Jean-Luc. Just having my final checkup. As Beverly and Ogawa discussed her treatment, Picard's gaze drifted to the bed where an unknown Antosian lay in a stasis tent, unmoving. His sculpted hair was a rat's nest instead of the beautiful asymmetrical waves they preferred. On another bed reclined a patient who was having a surgery performed by the chief engineer, Geordie LaForge.
Will Data live, Mr. LaForge?
I'm afraid so, Captain. Picard then asked Data what happened, and the android gave a concise report. When he finished, Data glanced at the Antosian in the bed to his left.
To ascertain what happened to the Barcelona would require going over crew logs, computer records, and video logs without any guarantee of success. Unfortunately, the Barcelona is an unsafe place in which to work.
Beverly, now standing near Picard, motioned to the beds filled with other wounded. We can all testify to that. Our injured crew members will recover, given time, but I'm not so sure about the Antosian. Picard shook his head.
That ship is like a booby trap, and we have to guard it. I'm going to ask Starfleet to let us stay here until we answer some questions about the Barcelona, and your patient.
Dr. Pelagoff rose from a computer console in the corner and strode toward the stasis tent.
I've got one answer. I've identified him, Lieutenant Raynor Slevin. There was only one Antosian on board the Barcelona, and as for his treatment, the Antosians pioneered a drastic process called cellular metamorphosis, which we're unable to use on most species because of the side effects. But he might be able to withstand it. Offhand, I believe that's the only thing that will save him.
Beverly sighed. I only know the theory. I've never done it. Ogawa stepped forward. I have. I assisted when I was fresh out of school, in the last clinical trial on humans. They were all terminal cases. Great recovery rates, but unacceptable mental problems. And in around 20% of patients who undergo cellular metamorphosis, they have spontaneous postmorphosis, shape-shifting. I wouldn't consider it for a human, but him... All eyes turned to the still figure in the stasis tent, who already looked like a body in a shroud. Beverly checked the vital signs projected above the patient's bed and gazed wistfully at Captain Picard. You'll schedule a funeral, and I'll schedule a procedure for which I'll need a lot of help. Data sat up in bed, a quizzical look on his face. It's ironic. Cellular metamorphosis. It's one of the processes we identified in the Genesis matrix. The Genesis emitter couldn't work without it. On Torna 4, Prylar Yorka stood impatiently in the drizzling rain outside the rusted corrugated warehouse, waiting to get in. The Bajoran monk felt exposed in the blackness of the rainy night, even though two loyal acolytes stood at his side. He clutched in his shivering arms the box given him by the spirit of Kai Opaka. He was still afraid to open it. He even imagined it was one of the missing orbs of the prophets. He was certain that the authorities of Torna 4 were looking for him, as were the Romulan assassins. It had taken begging and outright blackmail for the former Vedic to secure passage for the three of them, transporting off of Torna 4 to an orbiting freighter. Yorka got nervous when he noticed someone approaching. He was relieved to see it was the little Ferengi who had been in the temple with his three wives. Only now the Ferengi was alone.
Ah, Prylar Yorka. I see that we have the same idea. I don't blame you for getting away after that fracas at your temple.
Sherlock, isn't it? When I last saw you, you were in difficult circumstances. The Ferengi smiled blissfully, showing an array of jagged teeth.
I thought about the rules you quoted me, Prylar. There's plenty of money to be made in a disaster of this scope.
I'm glad I helped. Where are your lovely wives? Sherlock shrugged.
Well, that's how I got out of my circumstances. Sometimes you must divest in order to gain. But why are you standing out here in the rain?
The Ferengi banged on the metal door.
We are paying customers, and you are a moron for keeping people waiting. A robber could come by and steal our money before you have a chance to steal it.
They stepped into a vast warehouse. A short line of people waited to step upon a single-person transporter platform. As they waited, Prylar Yorka noticed that in one corner there was a replicator. He ambled over to the two hulking Centaurians who sat around the replicator.
You need something for your trip?
Yorka held out his gleaming metal box. Can you replicate this, contents and all, without opening it, without saving the pattern?
It will cost you.
They quickly arrived at a price. When Yorka received the replicate, he shoved a small piece of putty into one of its narrow hinges so he would know which one was the fake. He returned to his traveling companions and handed the fake box to one of his acolytes. After they had paid their fare and were walking toward the transporter platform, Sherlock nudged Yorka and pointed to the box. You know, I will be your partner. Yorka blinked in surprise. Well, I don't need a partner. The Ferengi pointed to the boxes. Oh, I think you do, because you have something of value. You had one of those boxes, and now you've got two. It's a long flight to the Meldrar system. You will have time to get to know me better and realize that you do need me. As Admiral Nechayev stepped into the semi-private quarters of two comatose Deltans, a statuesque, dark-haired Vulcan woman turned and regarded her coldly. Can I help you with something, Admiral? Nechayev sunk into her chair with a sigh. You are Teska, the mind meld expert. Ambassador Spock is your uncle, and you spent your younger years on Earth. You left out that I am married to a Romulan. Yes. But has anyone told you... Our information shows that your husband, Hazmek, may be dead. Teska raised an eyebrow. Then I will have to take a new mate when the time is right. Now, if you will excuse me, you have to leave. I was hoping you'd let me stay. The Vulcan nodded. Very well, Admiral. Do not interfere with me, even if I appear distressed. Teska stepped between the two beds containing the ill Deltans and knelt down. She placed long fingers at precise spots on the patients' faces, melding with both at once. Her head jerked back as if she were slapped in the face, and she writhed in agony. Finally, she cried out. With fear, the utter dread. What are they? They haunt even our death memories. Can't live in this existence. With a grunt, Teska pulled her hands away from the Deltans and slumped forward onto the floor. Finally, she stood and faced Nechayev. That was difficult. An attack came from an external source, from a kind of shining rift, along with the monsters. Nechayev frowned at the comatose patients. Monsters did this to them? The Vulcan nodded. Yes, and letting them die would be merciful. Teska, I now have a ship, the Sequoia, and a destination. Would you consider shipping out with me as a mission specialist? What is the mission? To help us clean up Lomar, the homeworld of the species who unleashed the Genesis wave on us. The Romulans ransacked the place before we got there, but we may still find clues to study. One of our tasks is to revive the humanoid slaves left in suspended animation and question them if possible. It's been difficult just to keep them alive.
hence the need for mind melds.
Nechayev sighed.
Yes, it's absolutely necessary. When do we leave, Admiral? 32 hours from now.
The tall Vulcan nodded her agreement and left the room. Nechayev knew that Teska would be invaluable. The Genesis wave had passed, but in its wake lay destruction, danger, and secrets, now scattered to the winds like confetti. Nechayev could feel the peril as surely as she could feel her altered face still tingling from the surgery. After assisting in performing the cellular metamorphosis procedure on the comatose Antosian, Lieutenant Alyssa Ogawa staggered wearily into her quarters, surprised that all the lights were on. Even though it was the equivalent of the middle of the night, her 6-year-old daughter Susie plowed into Alyssa's legs, gripping her in a fierce and happy hug.
Susie, you told me you could sleep by yourself.
Tears began welling in Susie's eyes.
When Daddy comes home, it will be a lot easier. Tell me again where he is.
Alyssa strolled to the food replicator, thinking about her husband Andrew.
I don't know exactly where he is. He went to help some people survive the Genesis wave. As we discussed with Counselor Troy, your father is considered missing. I think he's still helping people.
Susie frowned.
I just want all of us to be together. Me too, sweetie. Me too.
Still, Alyssa wondered how long it would be before she could admit that Andrew would not be coming home. When Captain Picard strode onto the bridge of the Enterprise, he nodded to Commander Riker and looked at the view screen. The Barcelona continued to float in the glittering starscape, looking deceptively peaceful.
Report, number 1. Situation unchanged, sir. Except combined radiation is up 6%.
The captain's lips thinned into a frown.
Then let's prepare a probe. In fact, several probes. I'd rather lose probes than crew members.
Data turned to Picard.
Captain, 3 Romulan warbirds are coming out of warp off the port bow. A recorded message is coming through.
On the view screen appeared the image of a striking female Romulan, standing erect on her bridge.
Enterprise, I'm Commander Kalina of the Javlik, also commander of this task force. We have reason to believe that you possess phase-shifting technology which belongs to the Romulan Star Empire. You have 1 hour to turn over this technology, or we may require permission to board your ship. End transmission.
Riker looked at Picard.
They must mean the Brahms suits.
Picard nodded and turned to Data.
Ready the probes for the Barcelona.
As he tugged on his tunic, he turned back to Riker.
We can't outfight the Romulans, and we can't outrun them. I think you had better gather up the Brahms suits. And it won't hurt to ask if they have any Genesis technology that they should turn over to us. Perhaps we can find out more about the Javlik.
The Ferengi Chelak eyed the 3 Bajorans who sat across from him in the mess hall of the freighter. He pointed to the gleaming box.
You're going to need a way to promote this and raise some money with it. And you're going to have to do it fast, but secretly, because you know people are trying to kill you for it.
Yorka gazed intently at Chelak, as if measuring him against a congress of saints.
Can you give me one good reason why I should take you into our confidence?
The Ferengi met the gaze of the big monk.
I know you don't have any idea what's in that precious box of yours, and neither do I. We're all operating on faith. Faith in you, Prylar. I feel compelled to help you, and I really don't know why.
That must have struck the right note, because the Bajoran's face softened.
We need to open the gift, Chelak, but someplace quiet, isolated, with no one knowing. Well, Meldrar 1 is a sleepy place. The biggest employer is the penal colony. Our crew says there are commercial tours of the colony by shuttlecraft. While this ship is offloading their cargo, maybe we can get one of these shuttlecraft and head around to the other side of the moon. It's deserted. I'm sure there must be somebody we can bribe to do this. Let me handle it, partner.
With that, Shellock gave Yorka a snaggle-toothed smile. The Andorian tactical officer on the bridge of the Enterprise reported to Picard.
Commander Kalina of the Javlik wishes to speak with you, Captain.
Picard sat in his command chair. Seated beside him was Counselor Troy, quietly concentrating on the view screen. The dark eyes of the beautiful Romulan commander smoldered with anger.
Are you mocking me, Captain Picard? You wish us to turn over Genesis records and emitters before you'll return the technology you stole from us? We do not have any of this Genesis technology. I suggest you prepare to be boarded.
Picard smiled, remaining cordial.
I was going to suggest that we meet face to face. I fully expect to hand over the radiation suits, but we distributed billions of these suits. They are all over the quadrant. Why exactly do you want to search our ship? You have 30 more minutes to comply, Captain. End transmission.
Deanna Troi folded her arms and looked at Picard.
I think she's lying, Captain. And I don't like her either.
Picard turned to Tactical.
Go to Yellow Alert and contact Starfleet.
In sickbay, Dr. Beverly Crusher sat in the chair beside her Antosian patient, Raynor Slevin. The cellular metamorphosis was presumably successful thanks to Ogawa's experience. Vital signs were normal. But she had little idea how long recovery ought to take.
If only you'd wake up. When you awaken, you will find things are better than in your nightmare.
To her surprise, her Antosian patient tried to sit up.
The others! The others!
Crusher studied his vital signs overhead. The Antosian looked strong and healthy, without any outward indication of the ordeal he had gone through.
I'm Dr. Beverly Crusher. You're in sickbay on the Enterprise. You've been rescued and treated. Right now, you should try to sleep.
Raynor Slevin looked at her.
I don't remember much of it. I don't know how you did it, but I must have been nearly dead.
She gave him a thoughtful smile.
After you've rested, I want to discuss your treatment.
Raynor Slevin beamed at her with a look of adulation.
Thank you, Dr. Crusher, for everything.
On the bridge of the Enterprise, the Andorian at Tactical looked up from his console in surprise.
Captain Picard, we have just gotten a message from the Javlik. Because they have received no answers to their hails from the Barcelona, they are boarding her. Transports are in progress from the Petrask, which must be their troop ship.
Picard rushed to the door.
Tell them no. It's too dangerous.
They aren't answering hails, Captain.
Open a channel. Commander Kalina of the Javlik, you must stop sending troops over to the Barcelona. They're all in danger for their lives. Plus, there are deadly levels of unidentified radiation.
The captain looked expectantly at his tactical officer, who shook his head.
No response, no acknowledgement.
Picard tapped his comm panel.
Bridge to data. Delay the probes and return to the bridge immediately.
In the unfamiliar corridor of the Starfleet ship Barcelona, Romulan Centurion Tarsik stood outside the aft torpedo room with his squad, where scanners had discovered 2 life forms. His scouts were already rigging plasma explosive charges, but Centurion Tarsik felt magnanimous, so he called out.
Inside the torpedo room. Listen to me. Open the door and give yourselves up.
There was no response. The old Centurion shrugged and gave the order to detonate. After the blast, his squad rushed toward the smoky gash in the hatch. Tarsek called to his men.
Be valiant! Press forward!
Instead, they were stampeding back. Two of his men crashed into him, spinning the Centurion around.
No one called retreat! Get up, you coward!
The bleeding soldier could only point toward the gash in the hatchway. Slithering from the gash was some tentacled creature that was as black as space. Its body was almost opaque, except for a dozen eel-like jaws, which snapped, writhed, or chewed on bits of bone. Behind the beast, there was nothing but darkness, a kind of black void into which most of his squad had vanished.
Squad 1 to Petrask. Situation urgent. Encountering unknown hostiles. Abandon the mission and evacuate.
Like a giant slug with a dozen bristling antennae, the dark beast oozed down the corridor, closing upon the old warrior. Where it passed, it left a black trail that seemed to erase the deck, the bulkheads, and the sea. Tarsek began blasting. It was like shooting into a black hole that was growing in size every second. He couldn't outrun it. Suddenly, a figure in a white radiation suit appeared behind him. "Hold me." Tarsek gripped his savior just as the blackness reared up like a hellish wave. Then he felt the miracle of the transporter beam. Tarsek was instantly gratified to find that he was standing with his fellow soldiers from the mission, 7 of them in all, counting their savior in white. But it was an unfamiliar, brightly lit transporter room, not on any Romulan vessel. A human working the transporter controls looked up. "I'm Commander William T. Riker. Welcome to the Enterprise." A few moments later, on the bridge, Captain Picard stood before the angry visage of Commander Kalina on the view screen. "I didn't kidnap your crew members. You don't have any idea what they encountered on the Barcelona, and neither do we. When you didn't use some kind of signal amplifier to transport your people back, you condemned them to death." Then Picard tried to muster some charm. "Commander Kalina, I feel it's more important than ever that we meet face to face and share what knowledge we have. Before you disrupt our mission, you ought to know what we are doing." The Romulan commander nodded curtly. "Very well. When you return my personnel, you may come along for a brief meeting. End transmission." When Captain Picard stepped off the transporter platform, he spotted Commander Kalina standing in the corner, half bathed in shadows. She was taller than he expected, with a regal bearing. Her fierce eyes were darker and more intense in person. "Welcome aboard the Javlik, Captain. On behalf of my crew, thank you for your quick work in saving members of our boarding party. What action were you going to take next?" He studied her carefully and decided to be truthful. "We were going to send probes over." Kalina gave him a brief smile. "We withdraw the request to search your ship, although you will turn over the prototype radiation suits made from our technology." "And if we give you the radiation suits, you'll leave?" She frowned. "No. We have to investigate that derelict ship for our report." Picard nodded. "We should cooperate and share information. If you will show me what you're doing, I'll try not to duplicate it with our probes." The elegant Romulan smiled again. "Very well. I'll take you to our observation room and show you some of our scanner results." The observation room of the Javlik was equivalent to the stellar cartography room on the Enterprise. It featured a brilliant three-dimensional display with multi-level platforms. Now, the panoramic display had begun to shimmer and break apart. The mammoth warbird shook as if struck by a quantum torpedo. Captain Picard staggered to stay on his feet, as did the Romulan commander.
Commander Kalina to the bridge. Are we under attack? Are shields up?
Picard to Enterprise. He waited for an answer, and none came. Picard to bridge. A nervous technician looked up from his console.
Commander Kalina, the Petrask is no longer registering on scanners. Neither is the Starfleet ship.
Picard whirled about. Which ship? The Romulan checked his readouts.
The derelict, the Barcelona. They were right next to each other.
Another Romulan called out. Commander, there are ship-wide failures. Shields are down. Commander Kalina looked pointedly at Picard.
The shuttle bay is not far from here. We could take a look for ourselves.
Picard nodded, and together they ran down the corridor. As a Ferengi businessman, Chelok had been to some desolate, commerce-forsaken places in his long life, but he had never been anywhere more foreboding than the moon of Meldrar I. The bleak wilderness had nothing but gray sand, weather-beaten mountains, and a few scrubby plants growing in the thin atmosphere. He had to draw frequently on the oxygen mask hanging at his side. He was glad it was Yorka carrying the box and not him. The Bajoran monk was followed by his two acolytes and their nervous shuttlecraft pilot, a young human female named Cassie Jackson. She spoke to Chelok. I thought you just wanted to see the usual spots, the usual tour. Chelok shook his head. This is where we want to be. Now either leave us alone or tag along and keep your mouth shut. With Yorka in the lead, clutching his box, the small party trudged across the lunar landscape. The Bajoran was followed by the two acolytes, the pilot and the Ferengi, who huffed liberally from his oxygen tank. Finally, Yorka set the metal box very carefully in the slate-gray dirt. He knelt down in front of the box and reached for the delicate recessed handle. I'm going to open it. Chelok and the pilot, Cassie Jackson, drew closer, as did one of the acolytes. The other acolyte wandered up a craggy stone to take a look at something in the distance. Inside the box, a gorgeous red and black display glimmered in a language and symbols which Yorka had never seen before. Around this brilliant screen were large jewel-like buttons, red, green, blue, plus yellow. You don't have a user's manual, do you? Yorka ignored the Ferengi and looked at his acolyte.
Yellow is the color of the wormhole.
Before they could stop him or say anything, he pressed the yellow button. The box seemed to be powering up. And without even thinking, Yorka pressed the green button with his thumb, and the object began to vibrate under his hands.
Praise be to the prophets!
Chelok grabbed Yorka by the shoulder.
Turn it off! You don't know what you're doing!
Oh, I think I do, Chelok.
In quick succession, Yorka hit the red and blue buttons. The back of the box opened, revealing a lens, and a glowing beam shot out. Wherever it played, the land burst into flames, with brilliant green waves that scorched everything. Yorka realized that his youngest acolyte was somewhere out there in the midst of the searing green flames. He pulled the other acolyte back before he could step into the beam.
Leave him. You can't save him. He's gone.
As the green flames began to recede, shapes began to rise from the desolate moonscape. Enormous plants were growing at an accelerated pace. Yorka knew that this was a gift from the prophets. The beam suddenly stopped, and the small lens on the back of the box closed again. Prylar Yorka grinned with delight and threw his hands into the air.
I have found it! The orb of life!
The Ferengi gazed in awe at the incredible tangle of misshapen vines and sprawling trees.
I'm not really sure that's an orb. I have a better guess what it is.
With a scowl, Yorka stepped toward the Ferengi.
I say it's an orb. Okay, Orb of Life it is. Catchy name, has a pre-soul recognition, and it delivers life. How do you want to promote it?
I want everyone to know, especially the Vedic Assembly. But we also have to protect it.
The pilot, Cassie, stepped into the conversation. Wait a minute. You need me more than anyone, because that mess of a jungle is going to draw attention. So what am I bid for one shuttlecraft ride out of here? Yorka jumped to his feet.
You'll get nothing. You're just being an opportunist.
Sherlock put his arm around the young woman.
Ignore him. We'll give you all we've got as soon as we can. You don't bargain with somebody who has all the supply when you only have demand.
With Commander Kalina at the controls and Captain Picard in the co-pilot's seat, a small green shuttlecraft soared away from the space doors of the Javlik. A vast field of debris floated in space where the Barcelona and the Petrask had been. A huge black curtain that blocked out half the stars was in their viewport. Without warning, a score of spinning tentacled creatures came hurtling through the confetti of debris, striking their shields. The craft shuddered, and Kalina announced,
Shields failing. Something in the composition of those creatures. I'm shutting down everything but life support. They seem to be attracted to our energy sources. Without power, perhaps we can blend in with the debris.
Captain Picard waited tensely as the Romulan commander worked the controls of the shuttlecraft. Suddenly, the instruments at every station went dark. It was almost peaceful, drifting among the sparkling remains of the two starships. They moved to the back of the shuttlecraft and began to put on environmental suits to protect themselves from any radiation. As the two of them stripped down, Picard couldn't help but notice that Commander Kalina was a fit, attractive female, with a statuesque frame to go with her regal bearing. When they had finally donned the suits, they sat at the dark controls and gazed at the remains of the two great starships. It was numbing to think how many Romulans had been lost aboard the Petrask. Kalina turned to look at Picard, and her ebony eyes blazed into his.
We have to join forces, Captain. I've lost a warbird, with all hands on board. I want to work closely with you on this, until I am relieved.
He frowned back at her.
Do you think there will be such serious repercussions? Oh, yes. We failed in our mission.
Suddenly, they were nearly knocked out of their seats. The shuttlecraft spun around, colliding with other rubble. Through the window of the shuttlecraft, Picard could see a ship coming closer.
The Enterprise has got us. Yes! A tractor beam.
The star-shaped creatures had also seen the Enterprise enter the debris field, and they massed into a steady stream headed toward the intruder. But after a few minutes, the shuttlecraft was finally inside the protective bubble of the Enterprise's shields. The familiar voice of William Riker crackled over his comm badge.
Bridge to Picard. Captain, are you all right? Yes, number one. We are. Then stand by to transport.
On the bridge of the Sequoia, the tactical officer addressed the newly appointed captain, Alina Nechayev.
Sir, there's a hail for you from Admiral Whitcliffe.
I'll take it in private. Make ready for launch. Nechayev ducked into her private office. Up came the welcome visage of an old friend.
Good morning, Alina. We've been dealing with some very strange anomalies since the Genesis wave. Disappearing ships and crews, strange creatures, unidentified radiation poisoning, and we've got no explanations whatsoever.
Have my orders changed, Admiral?
Not at the moment, Alina. They desperately need you on Lomar. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the Sequoia may be uprooted and sent elsewhere on short notice. Whitcliffe out.
Taking a deep, bracing breath of air, Nechayev strode back onto the bridge. Her first officer, Commander Marbins, gave her a fishy look. Of course, it was hard for the blue-skinned Benzite not to look fishy with those pale eyes, scaly face, and blue tentacles all around his mouth. Marbins had expected to become the first of his race to captain a ship after the Sequoia skipper retired. Nechayev crossed to the captain's chair, wondering if Marbins would ever accept the fact that this was not his ship anymore. "Has Mission Specialist Teska reported on board?" "Yes, sir. All personnel are accounted for." "Begin launch sequence. Take us out to warp distance at 1/8 impulse." The Galaxy-class starship began to move away from space dock, leaving the repair facility in Earth's orbit for the twinkling vastness of space. At optimum distance, Nechayev gave the command to enter warp, and they began the longest leg of their journey to Lomar. In the Enterprise's observation lounge at a meeting of the senior officers, Captain Picard paced in frustration. He turned to Data. "So, the probes that we finally launched have been destroyed?" "Not destroyed, Captain. Absorbed into the dark anomaly." Picard frowned. "If it can expand without notice, it's a ticking time bomb. Does anybody have anything to add?" Dr. Crusher spoke up. "My patient from the Barcelona, Lieutenant Slevin, is doing well and has given us a report on his experiences. He couldn't tell us much that we don't already know, but he felt that his crewmates were somehow absorbed into the dark entity." When no one else spoke, Picard dismissed them. A short time later, Alyssa Ogawa strolled down a corridor with Lieutenant Raynor Slevin at her side, and the big Antosian smiled and greeted everyone they passed. If he could be returned to his loved ones, Alyssa reasoned, then why couldn't her husband Andrew be returned to her and Susie? "Have you got any family, Lieutenant Slevin?" He nodded. "I have my parents and lots of relatives on Antos 4, but no wife or children. We Antosians tend to marry late." "And what about your family?" "You have the worried look of a mother who wants to report home." That drew a smile from Alyssa. "Since we're just taking a stroll, would you mind if we stopped at home to see my daughter?" "Absolutely. I would love to meet your daughter." When Alyssa opened the door, Susie's voice rang out. "Mommy!" The dark-haired imp came running through the living room and tackled her mother around the waist. Raynor Slevin looked on, his handsome face beaming at the sight of the reunion. "Susie, this is my friend, Lieutenant Slevin. He came from the other ship, the Barcelona." "Pleased to meet you." Susie crossed to a shelf by the dining table, where several family holographs were displayed. She pointed to her father. "That's my daddy. He's helping people get through the Genesis wave. He's been gone a long time, but he's coming home soon." With dawning realization, Slevin looked at Ogawa, who lowered her head. When Susie was out of earshot, the Antosian turned to Alyssa. "I'm sorry about your husband. What are his chances?" Alyssa sighed and looked away. "He is missing, and that's all we know." Soon the three of them ate lunch, making small talk about Raynor's homeworld and some of the more famous escapades of the Enterprise. Afterwards, Alyssa and Raynor walked Susie to her classroom. At the door, Raynor bent down and shook her hand. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Susie. Keep up your faith, and you will soon see your father again." Skipping happily, Susie headed into her classroom, but Ogawa frowned at Raynor. "You shouldn't offer her false hope." "Until she has no hope, I don't think it's wrong to give her some." Ogawa sighed heavily. "I'll admit, I'm not sure how to handle this."
She's at a difficult age. Not old enough to hear the truth yet, but too old to be fooled.
Raynor Slevin smiled. You're never too old to be fooled, if it can spare you heartache. Teska surveyed the humanoids hanging from the ceiling in the underground chamber on Lomar. They were encased in transparent bags, which expanded and contracted at the rate of normal breathing. Shining a light into the morass, the Vulcan could see vines and clumps of moss snaking everywhere among the dark rafters. There were scorch marks and burnt bodies among those in suspended animation. In the battle to eliminate the moss creatures, the Romulans had decimated much of the life support system, dooming those hanging in suspension. Her human escort was Franklin Oswald, a medical officer. He had come to Lomar days ago and looked benumbed by his experiences. To him, these now were slabs of beef waiting to be cataloged and distributed. He gazed upward at the disturbing sight. Yeah, some of these bodies are centuries old, and so are the ships that were recovered. They must have needed them all to build this facility, but after that, they stored them, just keeping a few active. We're still trying various techniques to revive them, but the Romulans made such a mess of things that it's hopeless, in most cases. Where do you want to begin? Teska nodded solemnly. Admiral Nechayev wants all of them liberated and interrogated as quickly as possible. Oswald shook his head. That's the problem. Each one of these slaves was infested by the moss creatures, and that parasitic relationship is the only thing keeping them alive. It takes time to remove the vines and tentacles without hastening their death. Teska reached up and touched the dangling foot of the closest humanoid, who appeared to be a Vulcan like herself. Since saving their lives is virtually impossible, the logical procedure would be to interrogate them first. Oswald blanched. A bit cold-blooded, isn't it? The Vulcan cocked an eyebrow. The Romulans have seized everything of value from this facility. Get me a ladder. We must find out if the Genesis wave is about to be unleashed again. The invitation, which Chellock had printed on reed parchment like the ancient books of prophecy, had read, "You have been chosen to receive the most important revelation to the Bajoran people since the discovery of the wormhole. Please report to Shuttle Bay 42 in the ancient city of Tempasa, 1 hour before dawn on the first day of redemption." The invitation was signed, "Protectors of the Orb of Life." Chellock, along with the shuttlecraft pilot Cassie Jackson, had then flown to pick up the invitees. Vedic Zane of the Vedic Assembly, General Mira of the Bajoran military, and Government Minister Gatrick were now on board. As they sat in the shuttlecraft, Chellock peered out the window. "We await one more passenger, but we won't wait long for him, because he may have difficulty getting here. He's a wanted criminal. His name is Bacchus." General Mira jumped to his feet in alarm. "Bacchus? The Maquis leader?" Chellock shrugged. "Please look around you, General. Every segment of Bajoran society is represented on this craft. Except for one. The rebels. The criminals. The outcasts. And they're as big a part of Bajor as any of you. Bacchus is known and loved among these people, and we have to tell them about this discovery, too." The general wagged his finger at the Ferengi. "All I've got to say is, this had better be good." Chellock squirmed. "Well, you know how these orbs are. Good or bad, they're never boring." Cassie interrupted. "Someone's coming." The person was wearing a simple monk's robe and a hood which covered his face, making it impossible to identify him. Without a word, the new arrival stepped into the shuttlecraft. When the guest pushed back his hood to reveal his face, there were several gasps of surprise. It wasn't another Bajoran, but a distinguished-looking Vulcan. Slung over his shoulder was a large knapsack made from the same crude material as his robe. From a pocket on the knapsack, he pulled an invitation and presented it to Chelok.
I am here to represent Bacchus. May I be seated?
And without another word, the mysterious Vulcan sat down. Chelok took a seat beside the Vulcan as Cassie asked permission from Shuttle Bay Operations to take off. 5 minutes later, the shuttlecraft lifted off the pad. The 6-passenger shuttlecraft shot into warp drive with the cream of Bajoran society on board, having no clue where they were headed. Such was the drawing power of the orbs of the prophets, thought Chelok. Even a fake orb was better than none.